Continuing the lectures here on the calendar, we'd said that the Julian calendar, which was a huge step forward because it kept pretty close track of the seasons, went 365 days, 365 days, 365 days, 366 days. That averages 365 and a quarter days. And so this was the calendar. Kept track of the seasons way better than what they had before. Okay, but the problem is that 365.25 days does not quite match the tropical year. In particular, what happens is after about 100 years or so, and then what happens is the calendar is a little bit over 100 years. What happens is the calendar is off by about a day. So the vernal equinox, instead of occurring when it's supposed to, occurs about a week, not a week, but a day off. Okay, and then a little bit over 100 years later, it also occurs about a day off or so. And so the calendar is not quite keeping track because things are happening a little bit earlier than they should. Okay. Well, it's pretty close because you got to wait 100 and something years to be off by a day. Okay. Now, that was not a huge issue for a long time, but one of the problems they ran into was that March 21st was sort of supposed to be the vernal equinox. And so the church, the Catholic Church, calculates holy days based on the calendar. And Easter, a very holy day, is computed to be the Sunday that follows the full moon that follows March 21st. Now, you know, the Passover, the Jewish Passover, occurs on a full moon. It's the middle of the month, and so typically that means that Easter is right after Passover. So that's how it normally works. Now the problem is March 21st is, you know, because of the wobbles in the Earth's orbit, March 21st is not always going to be exactly the vernal equinox, and so if the full moon happens to occur during that once in a while that it's off of exactly March 21st, then that would make Easter about a month off of Passover, and that happened several years ago. The other thing that happens, though, is that if you use the Julian calendar, about every 100 and something years, about every 125 years almost, then what happens is that the equinox is consistently about a day early. And so over time, it gradually starts adding up. And so a couple of church leaders began to realize this. And what really kind of spurred it on was when some scientists started, you know, looking at this and realized it's off. And they were keeping track of the calendar of the sky. And there's this building called the Tower of the Winds in the Vatican, and it has a window. The sun shines in at noon on the vernal equinox and illuminates a fresco that has patterns of the sky and a symbol for the vernal equinox. Except that they took Pope Sixtus IV in there and showed him that the vernal equinox was actually happening not on March 21st, but over a week earlier. Okay. And so that means that slightly more than, or actually close to 30% of the time, because it was almost 10 days earlier, close to 30% of the time, what was happening was that the equinox was not on March 21st, rather the full moon would occur between the equinox and March 21st, and Easter will be celebrated the wrong month. And so he thought that was really a bad thing. And so he authorized a study as to what was wrong with the heavens and how to fix this whole problem. The problem turned out to be kind of complicated. And so what they did was all throughout Europe, people started studying the sky. Cathedrals and churches were built with bell towers or windows that were facing in such a direction the sun would come through, and they would observe exactly where it hit on what days. And so all throughout Europe, they were monitoring the motions of the sky. Turns out an interesting thing is that in this process of monitoring the motions of the sky, a fellow by the name of Nicholas Copernicus comes along and realizes that, oh, everything they thought about the sky was wrong. Okay. And totally changed our understanding of the solar system. Okay. But we'll get to that later. Eventually, after 100 years or so of collecting data, then Christopher Clavius, a science advisor to the Pope, it was like 100 years, so it's not the same Pope, came up with a solution to fixing the calendar. And he gave his findings to the Pope at the time, it was Gregory the 13th, and Gregory the 13th issues a papal bulletin, an authorization to change the calendar. Now, several things happen in this. First of all over Europe, different people were keeping track of years differently. Some people were starting the year in January. Some people were starting the year at the vernal equinox. Some people were starting the year at Easter. It'd be kind of an odd thing. You know, if Easter happened, April 3rd, that means April 2nd is one year and April 3rd is a different year. And so that's how many countries did it. And so Pope Gregory the 13th issued a new rule for calendars. So this we call the Gregorian calendar. The new rule is the year starts January 1st. Okay. It runs 365 days. And to make everything sync up, they took 10 days out of October in the year 1582. So in 1582, October was 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. Okay, that pushes the vernal equinox back where it's supposed to be. So now the vernal equinox is occurring in 1583. The vernal equinox would occur precisely March 21st, just like it's supposed to. And then the new rule is the years will all start January 1st. The year will go 365 days, basically just like the Julian calendar, with an extra day every 4 years stuck on the end of February. But that still would be wrong. So they would skip centennial years. Now, what's the centennial year? Centennial year is the last year of every century. So that's defined, for example, the year 2000 was not the first year of the 21st century. 2000 was the last year of the 20th century. And 1900 was the last year of the 19th century. 2100 will be the last year of the 21st century, not 2099. Okay, don't argue with me. This was established by Pope Gregory the 13th in establishing the calendar. Okay. So you skip centennial years. So the year 1900, even though 1896 was a leap year, 1900, 4 years later, was not a leap year. That was just a regular year. And then 1904 was the next leap year, so it went 8 years. Unless the centennial year is divisible by 400. So the year 2000, you can divide by 400 evenly and get 5. So 2000, we actually had a leap year. Okay, but 2100, you cannot divide 2100 by 400, so 2100 will skip a leap year. 2200 will skip a leap year. 2300 will skip a leap year, but 2400 we will have another leap year. Okay, in a centennial year. Okay, so 1600 they had a leap year. 1700 no leap year. 1800 no leap year. 1900 no leap year. So the advantage of this is that makes the calendar now 365.2425 days long. That is very, very close to the tropical year. It's only a fraction of a day off. So that means that it will run very well. We correct within 1 day, and the time that it's going to be off, it's going to run accurately for 3,300 years. After 3,300 years, then it's going to be off by a day, and I guess we'll leave it to them to figure out what to do with that time. Okay, but this is the calendar that we generally all use, the Gregorian calendar. Okay, now one little footnote here. The Pope is Catholic. He issued this in the 16th century. This is after the Protestant Reformation, and so what happens was that Protestant countries did not actually adopt the new calendar. In fact, the rumor got started that the Pope was trying to steal 10 days out of everyone's life so he could live forever. And so people actually went to war and killed each other over what date it was. Some countries eventually adopted it. England did not adopt the new calendar until well into the 18th century. So the British colonies in the Americas started using the Julian calendar, and they switched to the Gregorian calendar eventually. And so if you look at some of the headstones for the graves in New England, some of them will say so-and-so was born on such and day, old style, and died such and such day, new style, because the calendar actually changed while that person was alive, so you could not just subtract the birthday from the death day to find the age. Some did not adopt this for much longer. The Greek Orthodox Church did not adopt it, still has not adopted. So Orthodox Christians actually celebrate Easter and Christmas at different times than other Christians do. Russia did not adopt the new calendar until after the Bolshevik Revolution. And so that means that in World War I, Russian troops were fighting using a different calendar than other Allied troops. You know, imagine trying to coordinate battle. Say we're going to invade on such and such day. Well, that date that day is one date for one country and a different date for another country. So that makes it very difficult to coordinate things. And so this is the Gregorian calendar. This is the calendar that the United States uses. This is the calendar that most people use. And it goes back to Gregory the 13th and his revision of the old Julian calendar.